Hi everyone, my name remains Orishwa Daniel Etuewe. On today's episode, I'll be speaking with Mr. Harpreet Chima. He ran for Congress last year. Mr. Chima, how are you doing?
Pretty good. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you for coming on today's show.
Yep.
I don't know if you've noticed it. There are a lot of people out there presently here in the US, kind of crying silently.
Yeah.
Inflation on everything you can think about, on the rise. And I'm bothered too because I'm a family man, Back in a couple of months, I could go into one of the big stores, with $100 and I'm able to come home with, something substantial that can take care of my family, without having to say, oh no. But now, with $100, less than a little bag, and that's worrisome because I've heard mothers complaining, and I've also heard fathers complaining too. So I thought, within me, and I was saying, who can I talk to? Who can be a voice for the people? And I said, oh, Mr. Harpreet Chima, he ran for Congress last year. So if he kind of sees what other people are seeing and is not going to speak out at a time like this, that won't be nice. And so I approached you, I gave you a call, and I sent a text message, and you said, oh, I want to be on this, I want to talk on this. So the floor is yours, pretty
Sure.
short. Yeah. So what is happening in the US? What is happening in California? Why do we have increase on mostly what we consume? What's happening?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're not alone, right? There's, polling shows about 70% of people now feel like they're living paycheck to paycheck. 60% of people feel like they're not getting enough to eat regularly, right? And 30 million Americans are saying we often don't get enough to eat because of how expensive things are. So you're not alone to notice these things. It is a big problem. I think if you listen to the national news right now, people are stuck in the election cycle, and so the Democrats want to talk about how good the economy is because going into the election cycle, you want people to think that you're doing a good job. And there have been some improvements, right? On the lower end of the income scale, wages have gone up, and income inequality has dropped a little bit. But you get a $1 raise, right? A dollar an hour raise. But at the end of the day, when your landlord goes and increases your rent in California by 10%, because that's what they can do here, right? You have rent control in California, but it's 6-7% plus inflation. With inflation, it's 10%. So let's say you make an extra dollar an hour, right, this year. But if your rent is $1,500 a month, which is on the low end, 10% is $150. There goes your raise, right? It went straight to rent. If you try to move to a better place, that place is going to cost even more. So there's a lot of reasons for this. One part is that corporations are literally just increasing prices because they can. This is called greedflation. If you look it up, economists are slowly coming around to it. I think for a long time the idea was, it's a stimulus package that Trump and Biden passed. That's the reason prices were going up, because people are spending so much money. But now finally the stats are starting to show that it's just corporations raising prices because they can. Part of this is because we lack competition. You can see at the store, you can see all these brands on the shelves. But the reality is that one or two corporations own all of those brands. And so they can raise prices and you don't have anywhere else to go, right? If you might buy one brand and then that brand goes up and you switch to another brand, it's the same company. The money's going to the same people. So you have very few choices, so they can raise prices without really any damage to them, because it's unlikely that you're going to go to someone else. There's also this problem called horizontal investment. That's where the same rich people own shares in multiple companies in the same industry. So the airline industry is a good example. What you have is, because the same people own a significant number of shares in, let's say, American and United and United don't really compete with each other, right? Their CEOs and their executives understand that if they harm the other company too much, they're actually harming their own shareholders, right? Because let's say Bob owns $500,000 in each company. If he starts losing money in United, he might not make that same money in American, right? The stock's not one-to-one. Just because American goes up $1 doesn't mean United's going to go down $1. And so you have an incentive from executives to basically increase prices as their competitor increases prices. They increase prices. They're not trying to undercut each other because their investors don't want them to do that. And so basically that's where we're stuck, is where as consumers we have very few choices. You have a lot of monopolies. You have a lot of oligopolies where a few corporations own a large market share in an industry, and as consumers we have no choice. We have nowhere else to go, and so all we're forced to do is just piggy up and pay there's really no choice as consumers.
So Mr. Chima, What do you think you can do if you were in Congress right now, having to feel the pain of the common man? Because I've heard you talk about corporations. This is not going to help the common man. The common man wants a solution. So what do you think you would do other than what is being done right now by Congress and the lawmakers?
Yeah, well, partly it would, partly the reason the corporations are able to raise prices like this is because they use the news coverage of saying it's the social programs that are the reason that prices are going up. They blame unions, they blame increases in wages, right? Corporations, they go to the media and they try to spin this narrative that, hey, it's the workers' fault, it's consumers' fault. They just want to spend more, and that's why prices have to go up, right? We have to pay more employment costs. That's why things are costing more. They keep blaming the supply side problems to say that that's why prices are going up. Sometimes that's true, sometimes that's not. But they use this like media narrative of saying that there's other real reasons why we have to increase prices to then raise prices even if they don't have to. So if consumers more understood that some of these companies are increasing prices not because they have to, but because they can and they're just ripping us off, that may start hurting their market share. In terms of what legislators can actually do, in our Congress, our Congress is kind of bought and paid for. There's very little that they're going to pass. What you could do is you could start breaking up some of these monopolies. So there's no good reason for airlines to own basically our entire airline industry. Those companies could potentially be broken up. That way you reintroduce competition into the market. On other things like rent, which has been going up, you could introduce real rent control that doesn't, 7% or 6-7% rent increases. That's not real rent control. No one's making 6-7% more every year, right? Real rent control that caps it at like just inflation rates, that would actually protect consumers. So there are some policies that you could put into place, that could help around the edges. But a lot of this just comes down to we don't have actual control over our corporations in this government. They are monopolized, and unless our government goes in and actually breaks them up, there's just not enough competition for prices to come down. And luckily for us, like inflation is low in America compared to other countries. But again, I can cite these stats, I can cite the polls. At the end of the day, what matters most is what people are feeling at home. And the polls just show people are struggling, they can't afford enough to eat, they certainly can't afford enough to live, and people feel very trapped in this economy right now. And there's not much you can do in a day-to-day. It's up to our elected officials to try to figure it out and combat some of their own, some of their donors, some of the industries, some of the big wealthy investors, and actually fight for everyday Americans.
Very much, Mr. Chima. And if you're watching us right now on this channel, we want to hear from you. Drop your message. We're all talking about inflation, talking about the increase in the prices of goods and services. So drop your message. We'll get back to you. This is Mr. Chima. He ran for Congress last year, and that's why I brought him on today's episode, so that we could hear from him if there's any solution to what is currently happening in the US right now. Thank you all for watching, and God bless you. Bye.